Welcome back to the Nuclear Magnetic Resonance NMR Spectroscopy Part 2. In our previous video, we have learnt about the spin quantum number, and here we will learn about applied field and precision. Now, what is spinning nuclei magnetic moments? Some elements like proton have isotopes with nuclei that behave as though they were spinning about an axis much like the earth. The spinning of charged particle generates a magnetic field. As a consequence, the spinning nuclei behaves as though they were tiny bar magnets having a north and south pole. And the orientation of these tiny bar magnets is like that random way. But in presence of any external magnetic field like H0, they orient themselves as with the applied field and oppose of that applied field. Since a nucleus or an electron bears a charge, its spin gives rise to a magnetic field that is analogous to the field produced when an electric current is passed through a coil of wire. The resulting magnetic dipole mu is oriented along the axis of spin and has a value that is characteristic for each kind of particle. Here, the diagram shows in presence of any external field, the spin quantum number orients itself, that is plus half and minus half. Here it is with field and it is opposed to that field. Now what is precision? Precisional motion. Because the proton is behaving as a spinning magnet, it can align itself either with or opposed to an external magnetic field, as I have told you earlier. It can also move a characteristic way under the influence of the external magnet. Considering the behavior of a spinning top, the top has a spinning motion around its axis. It also performs a slower bulge-like motion. I think you have seen a spinning top. It has a bulge-like motion around the axis, in which the spinning axis of the top moves slowly around the vertical one. This is called precisional motion, and the top is said to be precessing around the vertical axis of the gravitational force of the earth. Now, precision arises due to the interaction of spin and the gravitational force acting downwards. This is the reason why only a spinning top will precess, whereas a static top will topple over. Since the proton is a spinning magnet, it will precess around the axis of the applied external magnetic field. It will precess in two main orientation. It is whether it is aligned or parallel with the field which is of low energy, and opposed or anti-parallel to the applied field which is of higher energy. Now what is precisional frequency? Some mathematical calculations are over here. The precisional frequency of the nucleus is directly proportional to the strength of the external field. That is, mu varies as H0 and also depends on the nature of the nuclear magnet. Now, magnetic nuclei, different atoms have different characteristics precisional frequency. According to the Larmor precisional theory, omega is equal to gamma H0, where omega is Larmor precisional frequency. And we know that omega is equal to 2 pi nu, and 2 pi nu is equal to then gamma is 0, and nu is equal to gamma h0 by 2 pi, where gamma is the gyromagnetic ratio, which is equal to intrinsic magnetic dipole momentum by spin angular momentum. As gamma and 2 pi are fixed, then nu is equal to, that is precessional frequency, is directly proportional to the applied magnetic field H0. Now energy transition. What's happened when a nuclei is at lower level and transit from lower to upper level, upper energy level? A proton, when kept in an external magnetic field, will precess and can take one of the two orientations with respect to the axis of the external field, either aligned or opposed, as I have told you earlier. If a proton is precessing in the aligned orientation, it can absorb energy and pass into the opposed orientation and vice versa by losing energy. If we irradiate the precessing nuclei with a beam of radio frequency, mind that it is also under a static magnetic field and it is precessing, and now we are irradiating the same nuclei with a beam of radio frequency. The low energy nuclei may absorb this energy and move to a higher energy state. Those who are aligned with that applied magnetic field, after absorbing the radio frequency, can go to the higher energy state, that is in opposed state. This precessing proton will absorb energy from the radio frequency source if the precessing frequency same as the frequency of the radio frequency beam. If they match, then the precessing nuclei will absorb the radio frequency. When this occurs, the nucleus and radio frequency beam are said to be in resonance. Hence, we use the term nuclear magnetic resonance. Now, after absorbing the radio frequency, what will happen? Width of the absorption lines in NMO. The separation of two absorption lines depends on how close they are to each other and the absorption line width. The width of the absorption line is affected by a number of factors, only some of which we can control. These are the factors, that is the homogeneous field, that is the applied field, how homogeneous it is, relaxation time, magic angle NMR, and other source of line broadening. First of all, the homogeneous field. The most important factor controlling the absorption line width is the applied magnetic field H0. It is very important that this field be constant over all parts of the sample, which may be 1 to 2 inch long. If it is not, H0 is different parts of the sample and therefore nu, the frequency of the absorbed radiation, will vary in different parts of the sample. This variation results in a wide absorption line. For qualitative or quantitative analysis, a wide absorption line is very undesirable, since we may get overlap between neighboring peaks. Now, relaxation time. The second important factors that influences the absorption line width is the length of time that an excited nucleus stays in the excited state. We know that delta E into delta T is equal to constant from Heisenberg uncertainty principle. where delta E is the uncertain in the value of E, delta T is the length of time a nucleus spends in the excited state. Since delta E and delta T is a constant, when delta T is small, delta E is large. But we know that E is equal to h nu and that h is a constant. Therefore, any variation in E will result in a variation in nu. If E is not an exact number but varies over the range E plus delta E, then nu will not be exact but vary the corresponding range of nu plus delta nu. Then we have E plus delta E is equal to h nu plus delta nu. We can summarize this relationship by saying that when delta t is small, delta t is large and therefore delta nu is also large. If delta nu is large, then the frequency range over which the absorption takes place is wide and a wide absorption line results. There are two principal modes of relaxation: longitudinal relaxation or spin lattice relaxation and transverse relaxation, that is spin relaxation. Now we will discuss about these two factors. First of all, longitudinal relaxation, that is spin lattice relaxation. When the nucleus loses its excitation energy to the surrounding molecules, the system becomes warm as the energy is changed to heat. This process is quite fast when the molecules are able to move quickly. This is the state of affairs in liquid. The excitation energy becomes dispersed throughout the whole system of molecules in which the sample finds itself. No radiation energy appears, no other nuclei become excited. Instead, as numerous nuclei loses their energy in this fashion, the temperature of the sample goes up. This process is called longitudinal relaxation, T1. Transverse relaxation, that is spin relaxation. An excited nucleus may transfer its energy to an unexcited nucleus of a similar molecules that is nearby. In this process, the nearby unexcited nucleus becomes excited. A previously excited nucleus becomes unexcited. There is no net change in energy of the system, but the length of the time that one nucleus stays excited is shortened. This process, which is called transverse relaxation, T2. Magic angle enema. A problem with the examination of solids that are nuclei can be frozen in space and cannot freely line up in magnetic field. In this case, the NMR signals generated are dependent, among other things, on the orientation of the nuclei. The randomly oriented nuclei therefore gives broad band spectra, which are not very useful analytically. It can be shown that when one rotates a solid sample such that its axis of rotation is 54.7 degree to the direction of the applied magnetic field, the broadening caused by random nuclear orientations tends to be averaged out, resulting in narrower spectra. This is more useful analytically because it allows better resolution and therefore better measurement of chemical shift and spin splitting. In turn, this is very informative of the functional group and their positions relative to each other in the sample molecule. Other sources of line broadening. Our last point. Any process of deactivating or relaxing an excited molecule results in a decrease in the lifetime of the excited state. This in turn causes line broadening. Some other causes of deactivation include the presence of ions, paramagnetic molecules, nuclei with quadruple moment. Thank you. We will discuss our next session, part 3. Up to then, bye.